The town of Riverton, Pennsylvania, wasn't the kind of place where people locked their doors at night. With just over 12,000 residents, everyone knew everyone, or at least thought they did. The local diner was always filled with laughter, gossip, and the smell of fresh coffee. Life was simple, or at least it used to be. On the evening of September 14, 2018, the comm cracked. A 911 call came through at 8:47 p.m. A woman's trembling voice whispered into the receiver, "There's blood, so much blood. Please send someone. He's not moving." By the time officers arrived at Maplewood Lane, a quiet cul-de-sac at the edge of town, the sirens had already drawn a small crowd. Lights flickered in the windows of curious neighbors, and whispers spread through the night like wildfire. Inside the white two-story home of the Henderson family, the scene was something no one in Riverton could have imagined. On the living room carpet lay Daniel Henderson, a 42-year-old local contractor, his shirt soaked with blood. His wife, Claire, was crouched beside him, her hands stained red, screaming for help. Their teenage daughter, Emily, stood frozen in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Detective Mark Callahan, a veteran with 20 years on the force, arrived moments later. His reputation was one of precision, patience, and an uncanny ability to see what others missed. He stepped carefully into the house, scanning every detail. The broken glass near the couch, the faint smell of gunpowder in the air, the half-empty glass of whiskey on the table. This wasn't a robbery, this wasn't random. Something about it felt personal. Detective Mark Callahan stood quietly, watching the paramedics lift Daniel Henderson's body onto the stretcher. Claire's cries echoed through the room, sharp and piercing, like glass shattering in the night. Emily remained silent, her eyes vacant, as though her mind had escaped somewhere far away. "Mrs. Henderson," Callahan said gently, kneeling beside Claire, "I need to ask, did you see who did this?" Claire shook her head violently. I don't know. I was upstairs, I heard a noise, and when I came down," her voice broke. He was already on the floor. Callahan noticed the hesitation, the pause before the words. It wasn't unusual. Trauma often twisted memory, but something about her tone gnawed at him. Officer Ramirez, his young partner, approached with a notebook. "No forced entry," Ramirez reported. "Back door was unlocked, but nothing's broken. Whoever came in might have been let in." Callahan's eyes drifted to the glass of whiskey on the coffee table. One glass, not two. If Daniel had been drinking with someone, where was the other glass? Did your husband have enemies? Callahan asked Claire. She sniffled, wiping her tears with trembling hands. Daniel was. He was stubborn. He had disputes with clients sometimes, but nothing like this. Nothing violent. But the way her eyes shifted told a different story. From the corner of the room, Emily finally spoke. "Dad was arguing with someone on the phone last night. I heard him. He sounded scared." That detail made Callahan's instincts flare. Arguments meant motive. Fear meant danger. "Do you know who he was talking to?" Callahan pressed. Emily shook her head slowly. "No, but I think it was a man." His voice was low, angry. As the officers secured the scene, Callahan stepped outside into the cool September air. Neighbors were clustered under the streetlights, whispering, watching. He scanned the crowd, noting expressions, curiosity, fear, shock, and then he saw him. At the edge of the street stood Ryan Cooper, Daniel's business partner. His face was pale, his jaw tight, his eyes locked on the Henderson house. Callahan's gut twisted. Partners often meant money, and money often meant secrets. Detective Mark Callahan never liked coincidences, and Ryan Cooper showing up at the crime scene within minutes of Daniel Henderson's death didn't sit right with him. "Ryan," Callahan called out, approaching the man at the edge of the crowd. "Mind if we talk?" Ryan shifted uneasily. His dark blazer looked wrinkled, as though he had thrown it on in a hurry. His eyes flicked toward the Henderson home, then back to the detective. "Of course, anything I can do to help." "Funny," Callahan said evenly. "You were here pretty fast. How'd you hear about this?" Ryan exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Emily texted my daughter. She said something was wrong. I rushed over, Daniel and I. We were close. The word felt heavy, rehearsed. Callahan studied him, nervous hands, darting eyes, close enough to fight over money. Ryan stiffened. "What are you implying?" Callahan didn't answer. Instead, he gestured to Officer Ramirez. "Take Mr. Cooper to the station. I'll meet you there." Back inside the Henderson house, the forensic team had finished their sweep. Ramirez handed Callahan a clear evidence bag containing Daniel's phone. "Locked. We'll get a warrant to crack it, but take a look at this." He produced a slim black ledger pulled from Daniel's home office. The pages were filled with columns of numbers, invoices, payments. Callahan flipped through until he noticed several entries circled in red ink. Large amounts of cash, tens of thousands of dollars, marked as unaccounted. "Looks like someone was bleeding the business dry," Ramirez muttered. "Or laundering money," Callahan said, frowning, and whoever Daniel was arguing with on the phone. Maybe they didn't want him to talk. Later that night, Callahan sat across from Ryan Cooper in the interrogation room. The fluorescent lights hummed above, casting a cold glow across Ryan's tense face. "Ryan," Callahan began, "we found discrepancies in your company's ledger. Care to explain?" Ryan swallowed hard. "Business has been tough. Some clients pay in cash, some don't." Daniel handled most of that side. But the red circles, Callahan slid the ledger across the table. "Unaccounted money, tens of thousands. You expect me to believe you didn't know." Ryan's lips pressed into a thin line. His silence was louder than words. Callahan leaned forward. Daniel was scared. "Ryan, he was on the phone last night with someone. Was it you?" Ryan's eyes flickered. His jaw clenched. Then, quietly, he muttered, "I told him to keep his mouth shut. He was going to ruin everything." Callahan's pulse quickened. "And so you killed him?" Ryan's eyes shot up wide. "No, I didn't kill Daniel. I warned him, yes, but I'd never. I swear I didn't pull the trigger." For a moment, Callahan studied him. His words carried fear, but not necessarily guilt. If Ryan wasn't the killer, then who had the most to lose? Detective Mark Callahan left the interrogation room with a storm in his mind. Ryan Cooper might have been guilty of fraud, maybe even threats, but murder? Callahan wasn't convinced. Something about Ryan's desperation seemed more like fear than malice. Back at his desk, Callahan flipped through the Henderson ledger again. The red, circled entries nagged at him. They weren't just random cash discrepancies. They lined up with dates, specific dates, spaced weeks apart. Each one coincided with deposits into an offshore account, flagged in another ongoing investigation. Callahan picked up the phone. "Get me the financial crimes unit," he ordered. At the Henderson house, crime scene techs made another discovery. A set of muddy boot prints near the back door. They didn't match Daniel, Claire, or Ryan. Whoever had come into that house wasn't supposed to be there. When Callahan returned to speak with Claire Henderson, he found her calmer than before, too calm. She sat at the dining table, sipping tea, her eyes swollen but steady. "Mrs. Henderson," Callahan began carefully, "were you aware of your husband's financial dealings?" Her hand trembled slightly as she set the cup down. "Daniel kept things from me. He said it was business, that I wouldn't understand. I trusted him. But he was hiding money, big money. Were you really unaware?" She met his gaze, and for the first time, Callahan saw a flicker of steel in her eyes. "I knew he was under pressure. People were calling, leaving messages. He wouldn't tell me who, but he said if anything happened to him, I should protect Emily." That sentence hit Callahan like a punch. If anything happened to him, Daniel knew he was in danger. Later that evening, Callahan reviewed Daniel's phone records. One number appeared over and over again in the last 2 weeks, unlisted, traced to a prepaid burner. Whoever owned it wanted to stay invisible, but one call stood out. A brief conversation logged just 24 hours before Daniel's death. The cell tower location pinged near Pittsburgh, more than 2 hours away. "Who the hell were you talking to, Daniel?" Callahan muttered under his breath. Meanwhile, in a quiet motel room outside town, a man sat smoking by the window. His duffel bag lay open on the bed, filled with cash and a pistol. His burner phone buzzed. He answered, his voice low and rough. "It's done. Henderson won't be a problem anymore." Detective Mark Callahan barely slept that night. The phone records, the ledger, the whispers of offshore accounts, all of it pointed to something bigger than a simple dispute between business partners. Daniel Henderson hadn't just been killed, he'd been silenced. The next morning, Callahan met Officer Ramirez at the precinct. Ramirez tossed a manila folder onto the desk. "Got something, that burner number, cross-referenced it with DA activity. Guess what, our mystery caller is linked to a suspected contract killer, name's Victor Kane, former military, went underground 10 years ago, works for cash, no ties, no trail." Callahan flipped through the mugshots. Kane's cold, sharp eyes stared back at him from a grainy surveillance still. A man used to violence, a man used to making people disappear. So Daniel was mixed up with people who could afford a professional hitman. Callahan muttered. "Question is, why?" Meanwhile, at the Henderson home, Claire tried to comfort her daughter Emily, but Emily's voice was barely a whisper. "Mom, I don't think Dad trusted Ryan. He told me once that if he couldn't fix things, someone would come after us." Claire froze. Emily nodded slowly. "He said he had something that could protect us, but he never told me what." Later that day, Callahan revisited the Henderson house to comb through Daniel's office again. As he pulled open drawers, rifled through files, and scanned hard drives, something caught his attention. A hidden compartment at the bottom of a filing cabinet. Inside was a slim USB drive taped beneath the drawer. Callahan slipped it into an evidence bag. "Bingo," he whispered. Back at the precinct, the IT team decrypted the files. What appeared on the screen made Callahan's jaw tighten. Bank records, wire transfers, offshore accounts, and most damning of all, payments from a construction contract linked to a powerful local politician. Millions funneled quietly out of Riverton. Daniel hadn't just stumbled onto dirty money. He had the receipts to bring down half the county. That evening, Callahan got a call from Ramirez. His voice was tense. "Detective, you need to hear this. Surveillance spotted Victor Kane's car entering Riverton an hour ago. If he's back, he's not finished." Callahan gripped the phone. Then Claire and Emily aren't safe. The news that Victor Kane had entered Riverton sent a chill down Detective Mark Callahan's spine. Contract killers didn't make return visits unless there was unfinished business. By the time Callahan reached the Henderson residence, 2 squad cars were already stationed outside. Officer Ramirez approached, his expression grim. "Claire and Emily are inside. Shaken, but okay. We've doubled the patrols, but if Kane's here, he'll find a way." Callahan nodded. He stepped into the house, where Claire sat clutching Emily's hand on the couch. The girl looked pale, her eyes red from crying. "Mrs. Henderson?" Callahan said gently, "I won't lie to you. The man who killed your husband, Victor Kane, is back in town, which means you and your daughter are in danger. Do you know why Daniel kept those financial records hidden?" Claire hesitated, then shook her head. "I only knew he was scared. He said someone powerful would destroy him if he talked, but I didn't think." Her voice broke. "I didn't think it would come to this," Emily whispered. "Detective, I saw someone watching the house last night, a man in a dark jacket. I thought I was imagining it." Callahan's stomach tightened. Kane was already circling. Later that night, Callahan drove to a quiet diner on the edge of town to meet an informant from the Financial Crimes Unit. The man slid into the booth, glancing around nervously before handing Callahan a flash drive. "Your victim, Henderson, was about to blow the whistle on a money laundering operation, millions funneled through construction projects. The politician involved, Senator Alan Whitmore. He's got reach. Detective, if Kane's here, Whitmore wants every loose end tied up." Callahan clenched his jaw. A U.S. Senator, that explained the offshore accounts, that explained the Hitman. This case wasn't just local anymore, it was radioactive. Across town, in a dimly lit motel room, Victor Kane loaded his pistol with calm precision. He checked his watch, his eyes cold, calculating. A photograph of Claire and Emily lay on the nightstand, and beside him, this time, he muttered, sliding the gun into its holster, no mistakes. The clock in the Henderson living room struck 12:07 a.m. The house was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint creak of the old wooden floors. Claire sat in the armchair, clutching a blanket around Emily, who had finally fallen asleep. Two uniformed officers stood guard outside, their patrol car parked at the curb. Detective Mark Callahan sat near the window, his eyes fixed on the street. He trusted the officers, but he didn't trust the shadows, not with Victor Kane out there. Suddenly, a soft knock echoed at the back door. 3 slow taps. Callahan's hand went instinctively to his sidearm. He moved silently through the hallway, signaling Claire to stay quiet. Another knock came, this time sharper. Police. Callahan called out firmly, "Identify yourself." No answer. Instead, the porch light flickered, then died. Darkness swallowed the back of the house. Outside, Officer Ramirez scanned the yard with his flashlight. The beam caught something muddy boot prints leading toward the woods. "Damn it," Ramirez hissed. He radioed in, but the line crackled with static, and then, from the tree line, a figure emerged, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the quiet grace of a predator. Victor Kane. "Freeze!" Ramirez shouted, drawing his weapon. Kane didn't stop. He didn't even flinch. In one swift motion, he raised a pistol fitted with a suppressor. The muffled shot cracked through the night. Ramirez dropped, clutching his shoulder as Kane melted back into the shadows. Inside, Callahan heard the faint thud outside and cursed under his breath. He pulled Claire and Emily into the basement, locking the door behind them. "Stay here," he ordered. "No matter what you hear, don't come out." Claire's voice trembled. "Detective, please don't let him take my daughter." Callahan's eyes hardened. "He won't." As he ascended the stairs, he knew Kane was testing their defenses, probing, waiting for the perfect opening. But Callahan wasn't about to let the hunter claim his prey. The Henderson house was a fortress in name only. Thin walls, creaky floors, and 2 frightened souls hiding in the basement. Hardly protection against a man like Victor Kane. Detective Mark Callahan moved through the darkened living room, his gun drawn, every sense sharpened. The silence pressed heavy on his chest. He knew Kane was out there, somewhere, waiting for the right moment. A faint crunch of gravel outside, then the sound of the side window sliding upward. Callahan spun just as a shadow slipped into the room. The glint of steel caught the moonlight. Kane's knife, silent and deadly. "Police!" Callahan barked, lunging forward. Kane moved with terrifying precision. He slashed, forcing Callahan back, then kicked over a lamp, plunging the room into deeper darkness. The 2 men circled, predator against protector. "You should have stayed out of this, Detective." Kane's voice growled, low and steady. "This family isn't your problem." Callahan's grip tightened on his weapon. "They are now." He fired. The shot rang out, splintering the doorframe as Kane dove to the side. The hitman was fast, too fast. He rolled, came up with his pistol drawn, and fired back. Bullets tore through the walls, glass shattered, furniture splintered. Callahan dove behind the couch, his mind racing. Kane wasn't here to fight. He was here to finish the job, and if Callahan fell, Claire and Emily would be next. In the basement, Emily covered her ears as the gunfire echoed above. Claire held her close, whispering, "It's going to be okay. It has to be okay." But deep down, she wasn't sure. Upstairs, the standoff raged. Callahan reloaded quickly, then shouted through the darkness, "Who sent you, Kane? Was it Whitmore?" Silence, then a low chuckle. "You ask too many questions, Detective. That's going to get you killed." Another shot cracked past Callahan's ear, grazing the wall. He ducked, heart pounding, but now he had confirmation. Kane was tied to Senator Whitmore. This wasn't just a contract. It was a cover-up, and Kane would burn down the whole house to erase the truth. The living room was wrecked, glass shards glittered on the floor. Smoke curled from bullet holes, and moonlight cut jagged patterns across the chaos. Detective Mark Callahan pressed his back against the wall, breathing hard. Across the room, Victor Kane moved like a shadow, silent and methodical. The hitman wasn't rattled by the firefight. If anything, he seemed calm. "Kane," Callahan shouted, trying to buy time. "You're not walking away from this. The feds are on their way. You take me out, you'll never leave this town alive." Kane's reply was ice cold. "I don't plan on walking away. I plan on finishing the job." At that moment, Officer Ramirez, bandaged from the earlier shooting, stumbled into the house, his gun raised. "Detective," he called. Kane spun, fired, and Ramirez dove behind the kitchen counter as plaster exploded around him. Callahan seized the opening, rushing forward. He tackled Kane, and the two men crashed hard onto the broken coffee table. The pistol skidded across the floor. Kane swung a brutal punch that split Callahan's lip. Callahan retaliated, driving his elbow into Kane's ribs, but the hitman was stronger, trained, relentless. He grabbed Callahan by the throat, slamming him against the floorboards. "You can't stop what's coming," Kane hissed, his grip tightening. "Whitmore owns this town. Henderson was just the beginning." Desperate, Callahan reached for the nearest object, Daniel Henderson's ledger, lying on the floor where it had fallen earlier. He slammed it into Kane's face, breaking the chokehold. For the first time, Kane staggered, blood trickled from his brow, his eyes burned with fury. "You think paperwork saves them?" Kane growled. "That ledger is worthless without witnesses, and you won't live to testify." Down in the basement, Emily squeezed her mother's hand. She could hear the fight above, the crashes, the shouts, the gunshots. Tears streaked her cheeks, but her voice was steady. "Dad knew this would happen, Mom. That's why he told me about the other copy." Claire's eyes widened. "What copy?" Emily swallowed hard. "The USB. He gave me another one. I hid it." Claire's heart pounded. Her husband had left them the key to everything. Proof powerful enough to bring Whitmore down. Upstairs, Callahan and Kane circled each other again, battered and bleeding. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about truth, justice, and exposing the monster behind the curtain. And Callahan knew, if he didn't stop Kane tonight, there wouldn't be a tomorrow. The Henderson living room had become a battlefield. Broken glass crunched beneath heavy boots, smoke lingered in the air, and blood stained the floorboards. Detective Mark Callahan squared off against Victor Kane, both men bruised, battered, and breathing hard. "You can't win," Kane growled, wiping blood from his brow. "This isn't just about Henderson. It's bigger than you can imagine." Callahan steadied his aim, his voice firm. "Then let's start by ending you." Before Kane could fire, Officer Ramirez staggered out from behind the counter and unloaded 2 shots. One struck Kane in the shoulder, spinning him back. Callahan seized the moment and lunged, tackling the hitman to the ground. The struggle was vicious, primal. 2 men fighting not just for their lives, but for the fate of everyone Kane had been sent to silence. At last, Callahan wrenched Kane's gun free and pressed it against his chest. "Game over," Callahan spat. Kane's smirk faded. For the first time, the predator looked defeated. Downstairs, Claire pulled Emily close. Emily whispered shakily, "Mom, I still have Dad's USB. He told me to keep it safe, in case something happened." Claire's eyes filled with tears. "That's what he died for, sweetheart, to make sure the truth came out." By dawn, Riverton was swarming with law enforcement. Kane, handcuffed and bleeding, was dragged out by federal agents. His silence spoke volumes, but the evidence no longer needed his voice. Callahan handed the encrypted USB to the FBI task force. "Inside here," he said grimly, "is everything Daniel Henderson uncovered: offshore accounts, shell companies, and the name of the man pulling the strings." The agent nodded. "Senator Whitmore won't be able to hide from this." A week later, headlines blazed across every major network. Senator Alan Whitmore indicted in massive corruption scandal. For Riverton, justice had come at a heavy price. Daniel Henderson was gone, but his voice echoed through the evidence he left behind. Standing outside the courthouse, Claire and Emily held each other tightly. Emily looked up at Callahan, her young voice fragile but determined. "Dad wanted us to be safe. Does this mean it's finally over?" Callahan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. His tired eyes softened. "For now, yes, but there will always be shadows. The important thing is, You never stop fighting to bring the truth into the light. The wind carried his words across the courthouse steps like a whisper in the dawn, and for the first time in weeks, Riverton felt the stirrings of peace. Thanks for watching.